When I look back at the year I turned 30, I realize now that it wasn't the storms or losses that defined me. It was the people who walked into my life one by one, each at the right moment, and each taking turns to hold me up when I could no longer stand on my own. I had always thought life was something you faced head-on alone. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a small brick house where independence was not just encouraged, it was demanded. My father used to say, "No one's coming to save you. Figure it out." And so, for most of my life, I tried to figure things out by myself. But sometimes life doesn't just hand you puzzles. It knocks the pieces right out of your hands and watches you stumble trying to gather them back. That year began with a loss. It was March, windy and gray, when I lost my job at the publishing firm I had worked at for nearly 8 years. I'd poured myself into that company, editing manuscripts late into the night, chasing deadlines, believing my loyalty meant security. But the meeting was brief. Downsizing. It's not you, it's the market. I walked out of the glass building with a box of belongings, numb. My father's words echoed bitterly, "Figure it out." But for the first time I couldn't. Bills stacked up. Rent loomed. I pulled away from friends, embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to see me struggling. Then slowly they came one by one. Emily had been my best friend since high school, the kind of person who always smelled like vanilla lattes and carried chaos in her handbag but love in her heart. She showed up at my apartment unannounced one Friday, holding pizza and 2 bottles of cheap wine. "You can't hide from me," she said, pushing past me into the living room. "I'm fine," I lied. She dropped the pizza box on the table and crossed her arms. "Fine people don't sit in the dark at 3 in the afternoon." I wanted to argue, but her eyes softened, and I broke. I told her everything, the job, the rent, the fear that I had wasted my life on work that didn't matter. Emily didn't lecture. She listened. She refilled my glass when tears fell into it. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the crack where the light gets in." For the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that maybe she was right. A week later, I ran into Mr. Henderson, my old neighbor, while walking to the grocery store. He was retired, with silver hair and the kind of calm presence that made you feel like life moved slower around him. "Long time, kiddo," he said, adjusting his cap. "Heard you're not at that book place anymore." I sighed. News traveled fast in small communities. He chuckled. "Don't look so down. I lost my job at the steel plant when I was 35. Thought it was the end. But it was the beginning. Gave me the chance to start my landscaping business. Sometimes life kicks you out of the nest, because otherwise you'd never fly." I laughed nervously. "Landscaping isn't exactly my thing." "Doesn't have to be," he said, tapping his cane. "Point is, you'll never know how it goes until you let life surprise you." That night, I thought about his words. Life kicking me out of the nest. Maybe losing the job wasn't punishment. Maybe it was permission. Lucas came into my life unexpectedly. He was a freelance photographer who rented the apartment across from mine. We'd only exchanged polite nods before, but one evening he knocked on my door holding a plate of cookies he'd burnt. "Too much sugar," he admitted sheepishly. "Do you want to help me figure out what I did wrong?" I laughed for the first time in days. Over the next weeks, Lucas and I started sharing meals, stories, late-night conversations that stretched until sunrise. He told me about his years traveling, the failures that taught him resilience, the way he used rejection letters as wallpaper in his first studio. "You think falling is failure," he said one night, leaning against the balcony railing. "But falling is part of flying. No one tells you that." Something shifted inside me. Emily had comforted me. Mr. Henderson had reminded me that endings can be beginnings. And Lucas taught me that failure wasn't shame. It was practice. My mother had always been the quiet presence in my life. After my father passed, she lived alone in a small house in Dayton. I visited her one weekend, carrying the weight of my uncertainty. We sat in her garden, the air rich with lilacs. "I don't know what I'm doing," I confessed. "I'm scared, Mom." She placed her hand over mine. "Do you remember when you were little and you tried to learn the piano? You thought you'd never get it right. But you kept trying mistake after mistake, until one day your fingers just knew where to go." I nodded. She smiled. "That's how life works too. People take turns teaching you." Friends, strangers, family. They each show you a piece. And one day it all comes together. You'll finally know how it goes. Her words sank into me deeper than I realized at the time. Months passed. I picked up freelance editing jobs online, nervous at first, but then steady. Lucas introduced me to other creatives who needed help shaping their words. Emily kept cheering me on, celebrating every tiny victory as if it were monumental. Mr. Henderson checked on me, dropping off homemade soup. My mother reminded me to rest and breathe. Piece by piece, their voices built me up. One night, sitting at my desk, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. The rent was paid. Work was flowing. And more importantly, I had discovered a resilience I didn't know lived inside me. I thought back to each of them, how they had taken turns carrying me when I couldn't carry myself. Emily with her laughter and loyalty. Mr. Henderson with his wisdom. Lucas with his courage. My mother with her quiet strength. They took turns. And for the first time, I finally knew how life goes. It's not about doing it alone. It's about letting others hold you up when your knees buckle and returning that strength when it's your turn to carry them. Now, years later, I tell this story often. At workshops where I mentor young writers. At family gatherings when my nieces and nephews feel lost. I tell them, life isn't one person's burden. It's a relay race. People take turns. Sometimes you carry the baton, sometimes you pass it. And every time you learn how it goes a little better. Because I'll never forget the year I thought I had lost everything, only to realize I had gained the most important lesson of all.